We continue now at the top of Daf Chaf from Meseches Avodah Zara. This is Avodah Zarah Daf 21b. This daf is sponsored by David Grossman. Thank you for your sponsorship. If you would like to sponsor an Amud or a daf, see the description box below, and see the description box below to see how you can support this channel. On the previous Amud, the Gemara quoted from the Mishnah said, even in places where you're allowed to rent to an Ovid Kochavim, but it's not lebeis dira, it shouldn't be rented to them for residential purposes because they're going to bring Avoda Zara in there. And so the Gemara in the previous Amud made the following diak, that it says, even in places where it's permitted to rent, as if there are places where it's prohibited to rent. And according to Rabbi Yossi in the Mishnah, it was not prohibited to rent anywhere. Renting was always permitted. And so therefore the Gemara determines, Ustamach Rabbi Meir, this unattributed part of the Mishnah is following Rabbi Meir, because Rabbi Meir says it is prohibited to rent in certain places. To Rabbi Yossi, because if we're following Rabbi Yossi, Bechol Duchta Mogri, in all places, even in Eretz Yisrael, it's permitted to rent the houses to Ovdei Kochavim. And Rashi explains, Ustamach Rabbi Meir, in this part of the Mishnah is following Rabbi Meir, to Amar Be'eretz Yisrael ein maskirin, because again Rabbi Meir says that in Eretz Yisrael you can't rent houses to Ovdei Kochavim. And the Gemara continues at the two dots. The Mishnah said, Uvechol makom lo yaskir v'chulu, in all places he should not rent him a bathhouse, because then it's called by his name, meaning by the Jew's name, and then it's going to be used on Shabbos. And the Gemara says, Tanya, we learned in a brayser of Shimon ben Gamliel Omer, Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel says, Lo yiskor adam merchatzo lo Oved Kochavim, a person should not rent out his merchatz, his bathhouse, to an Oved Kochavim, mivnei shenikra al shemo, because it's called by his name, meaning again by the name of the Jew, of the owner. V'Oved Kochavim zeh osa bo malacha b'Shabbos uv'yamim tovim, and then this Oved Kochavim, this idol worshiper, is going to do work there on Shabbos and Yom Tov, and again this bathhouse is referred to as the Jewish person's bathhouse. And the Gemara continues and asks, Avol l'kusi mai, but what about to a kusi? Could you rent out the merchatz to a kusi, to a Samaritan? Again, the kusim, they had a questionable conversion and they were not careful in all of the mitzvahs. And so the Gemara says again, Avol l'kusi mai, shari, what are you going to say to a kusi? Is it permitted? Kusi amor avid bei malacha b'chol shel moed. Don't we have the same problem by a kusi, that the kusi is going to do work over there on chol moed? And the Gemara says to that, it's not a problem. B'chol shel moed anon nami avdin, and on chol moed, we also would do work there, and so therefore it's not a problem. Rashi explains, Kusi lo avin malacha b'Shabbos. The Kusi is not going to do malacha on Shabbos. They keep Shabbos. Avol b'cholu shel moed, but on chol moed, avid the Kusi would do malacha. To the medrash so from lo chayshi, because they're not concerned with the drashos of the Rabbanan. And b'cholu shel moed l'didon nami shari l'hachem merchatzos. But then the Gemara said that according to us also, it's actually permitted to warm up the bathhouse on chol moed. But the Gemara continues, Avol sadeyu lo Oved Kochavim. But what about his field? If he rents that out to an Oved Kochavim, to an idol worshiper, what would be the halacha there? Shari apparently would be permitted. And my time, and what's the reason why it's permitted? Because arisuse ka'avid, because if by a field he's a sharecropper, so all the work it's considered that he's doing for his share of the property. So if that's the case, if you can make that argument by a field, merchatz nami, by a bathhouse also, amri arisa arisuse ka'avid, why don't we just say that if he's a sharecropper, so to speak, of the bathhouse, so whatever he's doing is for his share? And the Gemara says to that, arisa de merchatz lo avdi inchi. People don't make that kind of arrangement by a bathhouse. That kind of arrangement that you make with a sharecropper, that he takes a certain percentage of the produce, we don't make that kind of arrangement when it comes to a merchatz. Rashi explains, Avol sadeo lo Oved Kochavim shari lahaskir. Again, his field to an Oved Kochavim, it's permitted to rent the field to him. Heichod deleko lemechash lechanias karka. Rashi says we're talking specifically where there is no concern of chanias karka. Again, a lot of these prohibitions come because of the fact that it is forbidden to sell property, to sell land to Ovdei Kochavim in Eretz Yisrael. But let's say you have a situation where you don't have that problem. Could go in b'chutz la'aretz, for example. Let's say in chutz la'aretz you're renting a field to an Oved Kochavim. Apparently that's permitted. V'afal pi shenikras al shemo. Now, even though it's still called by his name, by the name of the Jewish owner, lo chashdile, apparently there's no concern to have a Oved Kochavim shlucha. We're not concerned that the Oved Kochavim is considered to be the agent of the Jewish owner, in which case it could be problematic that he's working over there on Shabbos. Ela amri arisahu, rather we just say that he's an aris, he's a sharecropper. V'kibla olav lemechsa l'shlishu l'ravia, and so therefore again he's going to be working the field, and he's sort of like a part owner of the field. He's getting half or a third or a quarter of the produce. V'olav mutalasos, and so the work is upon him to do. It's not considered like he's an agent of the Jewish owner, and so therefore again the Gemara asks, why don't we say that by a merchatz as well? And the Gemara answered, we don't make those kinds of arrangements when it comes to a merchatz. And the Gemara continues, Tanya, we learned in a brayser of Shimon ben Elazar Omer, of Shimon ben Elazar says, Lo yaskir adam sadeo l'kusi, a person should not rent out his field to a kusi, mimnei shenikras al shemo, because again it's called by his name, it's called by the Jewish owner's name. The kusi zeh osa b'malacha b'chol moed, and the kusi is going to go ahead and do work in the field on chol moed. And so the Gemara says, but what are we going to say by an idolater? Shari, apparently it's permitted, meaning to say by a field, as we just said above. Because we say that the sharecropper, he's just working in his share of the property. But if so, kusinami, amri arisa arisuse avid. Why don't we say the same thing by a kusi, that whatever work he's doing is involving his share of the property as a sharecropper? And we will continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Chaf Beis Amud Aleph.